Hello everybody. This is a tutorial on Figma to help you with your poster design. I will give you some basic tips which I hope will be helpful in the process of the design of your poster. So as you can see, this is Figma. I'm already logged in with my account. You can create one for free to get the basic features. You can also register with your academic email to get full access to the full version of the software. You can run it in the browser or you can download the app. Both work just fine. So when you first log in, you will see this homepage, and what you want to create is a design file. So you click here. And this is how it looks when you just start. You have your canvas in the center. On the left hand side you will have layers, which we will see in a minute. On the top you have all the tools you need to create new elements on your canvas, and on the right hand side you have the properties window, which will populate as soon as you create an element. So you would usually want to start with a frame. So let's say I start a frame here. And when this frame is selected, I can see all its properties on the right hand side, and when I add a frame or any other element, it will be added to the layers. Now when I start adding elements inside a frame, they go inside the frame, inside a group, and again each element has its own properties. So for example, if I create a rectangle, let's zoom in for a minute. To zoom in, you press Command or Control and scroll your mouse button. Pay attention to the shortcuts here. Figma is very shortcut oriented program. It will help you to learn some of them to work faster. So as I said, for example, I selected this rectangle. I can change, I can go here on the right. Okay, and for example, I can make rounded corners. Let's say this is 20. Okay, I can also just click and drag to see it's changing live. Okay, which is very nice. And again, everything I created will be displayed here on the layers. To select different items, so let's say I made one rectangle and I want to create another polygon here. So to select them, I can just click, or I can go and find them here in the list. This is very helpful if I have many items and some of them are behind other items. So for example, let's say this rectangle, it's this polygon, let's change its color to red, and it's hidden somewhere behind, so I can change order by pressing the brackets. Okay, you see in the layers it changes the order, or I can also drag and reposition them in the hierarchy. So let's say if something is hidden behind something and I cannot find it, I can click it and it will show, and then I can move it around. I can also use arrow keys for more precise movement. With a shift and arrow, it's a bigger jump, and a simple arrow is just small steps. All right, so another tip about selecting things. So let's say I have several items, and they are sitting on top of each other, and they are inside a frame, but I also want to drag them together. I can select all of them and I click Command or Control G to create a group. So now you see they are inside a group, and I can move this group together. Now if I want to move the element separately without ungrouping them, I can again either select it in the layer window, okay, and move it around, or another option is click the group once, and then if you double click, you will go inside the group, and now you can select separate layers, separate objects inside the group, move them around, and then double click outside of the group, and then you can move the group again separately. So again, double clicking on the group will put you in editing mode of the group, and you can move things around inside the group, and then click outside and just have the group again uneditable. Okay, so the first thing you should do before you start designing anything, it's naming your file. So here on top by default, it's named on title. You can just double click and rename it to whatever you want. Let's name it my poster. Okay, and the best thing to start is copy a template from the templates file we created for you. The link is in the video description below, and we also shared it with you on Moodle. So here you see several templates. I recommend copying this one with a grid. We'll go over it a bit later, how to use the grid. But you just right click and you should have copy option. Right now, because I'm the owner, I'm getting some more options. So I will just switch to another account here. And as you can see in the preview, the grid is invisible, but you can just select the one titled poster template grid, or here from the layers, you can select the right frame, right click and copy that. The main difference between the templates, as we described during the class, is mainly in the title layout. So this one has the logo here on the right and the title and the names on the left hand side. Here the logos are on both sides. It's not important which one you use. As soon as you keep the header as is, you can change the background and of course change all the details, but please keep the header as is. So right click, copy. I'm going back to my new file. Okay, and right click, paste here. And here we go. Let's move it a little bit to the side so it doesn't interfere. With our frame. We can actually delete this frame, and this is the project we're working with. So one important thing, do not change the size of this template. It should stay the same. This is the size that the poster will be printed in the end. All posters should be exactly the same size. We'll talk about it in the end when we discuss exporting files. So as you can see, the file came in with the grid turned on. It's very useful to lay out things, but in the end you will probably want the grid to be gone. So the way you do it, you select your frame, and then on the right hand side it says in the properties window, you can see the layout grid is selected. You can turn it on or off, show only the columns or show only the lines or show both of them, and turn them off in the end when you want to preview things. One thing about the template, so on the left hand side it looks like one object, but when you click the little arrow here, you see all the inner components. Important thing is the trim mark. So if you zoom in, again, command and scroll your mouse button, you'll see those black trim marks. These are used to cut your poster in the end in the print shop. So everything you design should be inside a visible area. In the end, when you export, you will export everything, including the trim marks. But in the end, after they print and trimmed your poster, you will only see everything inside the trim area. Anything outside will be cut in the print shop. So pay attention to keep everything, not move your things outside of not move your elements outside of the visible area. And also, it's a good idea to stay away a little bit from the borders. Don't put anything too close to the border, because when cutting the poster, the knife moves too much inside. If there's a mistake, it will trim part of your poster. Some exceptions for things going outside of the visible area are backgrounds and other elements. We'll go and talk about it again in the end when we talk about the exports. All right, so this is our poster. This is our visible area. Here we have the header. So if you want to edit anything in the header, you need to open this and select the different elements. Again, you can just, if the header is not selected, you can just double click, okay, and go inside the elements and edit them. You see Figma is already kind of smart enough, and it knows if you click the text, if you double click the text, it will change the tool to a text tool. If you click a regular element like a box or a frame, it just goes back to the arrow. Okay, so we copied our poster template and we want to start designing something. So anything goes inside here in the main content area, the visible area. And before we start designing, it's a good idea to decide which colors we will be using in our design. So Figma has lots of plugins which you can use to do many useful things. I'll show you a few examples. And the first example is colors. So you click here on the resources button, you change to plugins, and you search for a plugin called Colors. Okay, here it is. You click the plugin, it takes a few minutes to load, and it will appear on your canvas. What this plugin does, it generates random color palettes, but it's clever enough to generate color palettes which work well together. So when you click generate, it will make a new set of colors, random colors, and you can keep going until you find something that you like. Now, if there's one color you love, for example, so like this green color, but I don't like the rest of them, I can click the lock button and keep generating colors with this color lock. So for example, I like this palette, and I like this gray, this light green, this color here, and I don't like this yellow, so I can keep generating. Okay. Another thing you can do is you can input your own color. Okay, so you say, okay, for example, I love this red. Okay, okay, I like this red color. I can lock it, and then I can keep generating things based on this color. So let's say unlock all of these, and everything will be generated based on this red color I selected. Let's try a few more. Okay, let's stick to this palette. Once I'm happy with it, I can I can click here, and I can add this to my document colors. Okay, so now these colors are part of my document, and to see them, I should just select any element in my design. So let's say this logo background. Okay, and when I select the colors here, sorry, let's move this plugin to the left. Okay, you can see the colors from the palette appear here. So I can just select any of them from the preset, which is very handy. Okay, so we have our color palette, which we're happy with. Let's talk 1 second about the grid again before we continue. So we have our color selected, and we have our frame. And remember, here in the properties, we turn off the grid. We can easily modify the grid by clicking its properties here to say, okay, instead of 2 columns, I want to have 3 columns. Okay, I want to have 4 columns, or 2 columns usually works good for a poster. By the way, the colors were also added here on the side. It's just an object with all the colors, and you can use the I shortcut. Okay, the I shortcut is a little eyedropper. Okay, again, press I, you get an eyedropper, and then you can click any color, and this color will be selected. So for example, if I create a new polygon here, and I want to paint it any of these colors, I select the polygon, I click I, and I click any of the color, and the polygon will become this color. Okay, so for now, let's delete it and go back to the grid. Okay, so any frame can have a grid. So only frames can have grid. I'm sorry. So let's say I create a new frame here, and I want to make a grid on it. I go to properties, and when you start with the empty frame, there is no grid, but you can add new grid. By default, it adds this very tiny grid that looks like a math notebook. But to change this to a more custom grid, you can click here on these buttons here. Instead of default grid, you can say, for example, I want to have columns, and then you say how many columns you want. Let's say 3. You can modify the gutter, which is the spacing between the columns. So let's say 100, you see there's much more spacing. The default is 20. We can go back to that. Basically, this is it for the grid part. So once you're happy with the grid you made, you can start designing your poster. You can just leave the grid I gave you as is, or you can modify it a little bit if you want. This one is already set to work well with the size of the header, so I recommend just sticking to that. You can maybe change the spacings a little bit if you need more space. So when you start designing, the best thing to do is just to throw all the elements you want to include, all the chapters you want to include into the poster. You can see some examples in the templates we provided you. Most scientific posters include the same elements such as introduction, methods, the results, conclusion, future work, acknowledgements, references, and so on. Again, you can see more examples in the templates we showed here. I'll show you an example by copying one of the existing elements. So for example, in this frame, I will take the methods frame to use as an example, and I just copy it, so Command C, Control C, I go back to my design and I paste it as Control V. Okay, let's hide the frame for now, the grid, sorry, not to obstruct our design. Okay, so the methods frame goes here. Right now we don't see the background because our background is white. Let's change the poster background to help us see things a little bit better. Okay, sorry, this is the entire, this is that background. I want to change the background of the visible area. So the visible area should be like this. We'll go back to the bleeding instructions a bit later. Okay, but for now, let's say we're working with this grayish poster design, or to make it look nicer, we can make it maybe a little bit greenish. Yes, as we said, we can select from our palette. So let's say I like this light green color, gray-green, okay, to work with. And I copied the methods frame. Okay, so the methods frame, to position it properly, it's a good idea to use the grid. So I can turn my grid on. So I can change the size to fit in my grid. Let's say I want to give more real estate to my method, so I can make it bigger and move it a little bit to the right to fit in my grid. And then let's hit the grid again to focus on our methods. All right. Okay, so we've placed our methods frame. We're happy with its position. And now we want to organize the different elements inside of it. So let's say we have our drawing here, which we're happy with the position. And now we want to edit the text. One important tool you can use when adjusting your text after you're happy with what you have, after you finish writing and modifying it, you place it here, and now you want to adjust it to the layout. A very handy tool is line spacing. So if you double click your text or just select the box, you can change the line spacing here, okay, to take it more or less space. If you have enough space, it's a good idea to space out the lines because it makes it a bit easier for people to read it. Or if you don't have enough space, you can just squish it a little bit, but it makes things harder to read. Also, don't do too much spacing. You need to find the sweet spot. Maybe 150% is the most you should go, the biggest spacing you should go for. Because if it's a little bit bigger, it's already getting a bit distracting, these big line breaks. All right, I'll just go for 140. And another tool you can play with, we can enlarge the box so it doesn't obstruct the end of our text. And another tool we can work with is the letter spacing here. So again, if we have some fonts with narrow letters, we can reduce the spacing to fit more text. Or if you want to space it out a bit, we can use this. But default usually works the best. Most fonts are designed in a way to keep the right spacing between the letters for readability. So I don't recommend using this, but line spacing is something you can easily play with. Another thing I want to show you is the difference between JPEGs and PNGs and vector files. So here we have two charts. They look quite similar, but when we zoom out, this one is a JPEG file. You see the text becomes very pixelated, while the other chart, if I zoom in into the text, it stays sharp no matter how much I zoom in. And to do it, to use your charts as vectors, you can create them in Google Docs. So here's an example of a chart I made in Google Docs. You click here on these three buttons here, and you say download chart, and instead of PNG, you select SVG. SVG is a vector format. Okay, so I saved my chart as an SVG file, and I just drag and drop it into my design. Here we go. So again, as you can see, if I zoom in, it will stay sharp no matter what. Another handy tool about SVG files is you can imagine they're made from objects. Okay, so here is my chart, so I can maybe rename it so it's easy to find later in my layers. Again, you double click to rename any object in your layers window. And inside my chart, right now it's on a white background, but let's say I don't like the white background. I want to have my chart on the same background as my poster design. So what I can do, I can go into my chart, and probably the last object is my background, and I can select and delete it. And now my chart has a nice background, same background as my design. Important thing to remember is the text should be the right color to work well or to be visible enough on the background. You can also select it here, okay, and just in the properties window, change the color of your text if you want to something more visible. Okay, one more thing I want to show you is if you don't have an option to import an SVG file, a vector format file, you can only import a JPEG. You can still get rid of the background quite easily. So let's look at this example. So remember, this is our chart, which is a JPEG format. We can click it, and then in our properties window, under layer, we can select a different option here. So you can see as I move through the options, it's called blending method. So multiply basically gets rid of all the white colors. You can see our chart because it's sitting on top of our gray background, so everything becomes a little bit darker. But on pictures, it kind of does the job very well. Okay, maybe we can use darken, it also works. Or we can go back to normal to have our white background. So this is a handy thing to use to get rid of white backgrounds. Okay, another thing I want to show you is formulas. You would probably want to use formulas at some point. So here's an example of how to make a formula. We can go back to our plugins. So as I showed you before, Figma has lots of plugins. If you click on this button here and select plugins, you can search for math. Okay, and there are different plugins to render formulas. I'll show you one of them, but you can experiment with different ones. So the one I used is render math, and the way it works is you create a text box. Okay, so this is a simple text box with a latex code. Okay, so as you can see, you create a text box with latex code inside. You select this box, you click on your plugin boxes, okay, and you click render math. What it does, it translates the code into a vector file of your formula. Okay, so I can basically double click, and you can see I can move different elements. It's created a new frame, and I can copy, Command C, Control V, my formula to my design. I can resize it. Important thing to remember, when you resize things, it will be freeform. If you want to keep the aspect ratio of your element the same, you hold the shift button, and then things will change proportionally. Okay, so this is how you create formulas. Very handy plugin. Okay, let's say you want to include some illustrations in your design. Okay, so one thing to do is go to Google Images or create it in some other software. But for some basic icons, again, Figma plugins is a very handy tool. So if we go to plugins and search for icons, for example, we'll get a few options of icon providers. So Icon 8 is one example. Usually these icons have lots of free options built in. Okay, some of them cost money, but the free options are usually enough. So let's say I search for a car. Okay, again, I can select an option here. I can use search for PNGs, but for posters, it's better to find SVGs. I think in this option, they want money for SVGs, but maybe you can find another plugin with free option. Or you can use PNG and just search for bigger resolution. Let's try SVG and find the car here. Yeah, okay, they want money for that. But we can try another plugin, but it's quite easy. Once you find something, you just drag and drop it into your design. Or if this doesn't work, you can just click it and it will automatically edit in the center of your frame. Okay, so the next step will be testing your font size and figuring out what's a good size for your fonts. So by default, I think in this template, there's an example here. Font size is 32. In general, it's a good size for posters. It's pretty big for documents, but posters, remember, we're looking at posters from far away, usually from 1 meter, maybe half a meter, the closest we get to a poster. So the font needs to be slightly big, but sometimes it's too big or too small. And an easy way to test is by printing it on an A4. So let's say you have your poster design. Let's go back to our template for a minute. It's going to be easier to do there. So let's say I have an element. I have this methods text and this picture. Okay. Let's select it. Let's select it and copy. Okay. Control C is the fastest. Okay. We can create a new frame here. Okay, frame. Once we click new frame, we have some options here, some presets. So we can create an A4 frame. And we can basically paste a piece of our poster on an A4. An A4 printer should be, A4 paper should be easy to print on your printer at home. So all you do is you paste it here. You export it as PDF. So you can right click, okay, sorry, not right click. You can go here to export. Export as a PDF. So here's the PDF option. And I save it, and then I can print it on my normal printer. I can hang it on a wall, take a few steps back, and look at it. If I can read the text easy, it's great. If it's too small, I should probably enlarge it. But this is a very easy and simple and a quick way to test your font size, how it will look in the end poster without printing the full thing. The last thing I want to talk about is how to save your poster into a PDF file to send it to the print shop. So before we do this, let's understand how things work in the print shop once they get it. I mentioned this at the beginning of the tutorial, and an important thing to understand is the concept of crop marks and bleeds. Okay, so when we send a file to a print shop, it should have some bleeds which go outside of the actual printed area and some crop marks. These crop marks are telling the print shop how to cut your poster, and in the end you will get this result. And the reason for that is very simple. If we send the print shop something like this without trim marks, without the bleeds, they usually print it in a slightly bigger piece of paper, and then they cut it. When they do the cut, the knife sometimes is not very exact, or the poster can move slightly. And what could happen is you will have these, if you don't have bleeds, you will have these little white stripes on the side, which don't look very nice. So if you want to have your beautiful background or some elements which need to touch the corner, the side of your poster, they need to be bleeding a bit outside of your actual design. And then when they trim it, it looks beautiful and nice. So there's a good example in this picture. Let's say we want to print this picture all the way to the edge of the paper. So we print a slightly bigger paper with the background bleeding outside of the final area. And after the print, we just cut, and then we get a very nice frame with all the colors, the backgrounds reaching the edge of our design. So if we look in this example, in our template, you could see that our backgrounds, anywhere that needs to be, any element that needs to be reach the edge, any color that needs to reach the edge of our design is outside of the trim marks, okay? So what we should do here, if I go back to our example here, at the moment the visible area is only reaching the trim marks. It's not going beyond them. So a good idea is, so I put it here just to mark for you the visible area, but the good idea is to enlarge these elements to reach outside of the trim marks. All right, so I'm just going to stretch it out. Okay, both sides. Okay, so pay attention that everything is, any element that needs to be sitting close to the background and trimmed should be bleeding outside, should have this bleed. This goes also for boxes, so if you want the box to touch the side of your poster, it should be bleeding slightly outside. Okay, it should have a bleed. So let's say I want this polygon, for example, to reach all the way to the edge, so I make sure it bleeds a little bit. If I don't want to touch it, so I make sure it has enough distance, so if there's some problem in the print shop and the knife, the cutter goes a bit, slides a little bit, it doesn't cut the corner of my triangle, so always keep some good distance. This goes also for any elements inside your boxes, so I very often see some designs where the text is very close to the side, it doesn't look very nice. Try to always keep some spacing between your text and the edge of the frame the text is sitting inside. Okay, so once I'm happy with my design, okay, I can click the frame, and here I will have export. By default, I think this should be empty, so the export on the right hand side is empty. Let's do it again. Okay, so once I'm happy with my design, I want to export it as a PDF. So I click the frame, I can click it here in the layers or just the title here. And in the properties, I scroll down all the way to export. By default, the export options are empty. I need to add a new export option, so I click the plus here. I scroll a bit down. The default is PNG. I don't want PNG, I want PDF, so I click PDF and I give it a name. Okay, I can give it any name, version 1, and export. Okay, I will get the PDF file. Again, it's important to check that I have the trim marks here. Okay, they should be located in the correct spot. Anything that needs to be outside of the bleed should be outside. Anything in the bleed should be inside the frame. And one last thing to check is the actual file size. So if for some reason during your work you resize the frame, I don't know why, before you send it to the print shop, it's important to check you have the right size. So an easy way to do it is take your PDF you just created and open it in Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader. Okay, so I will open it in my Adobe Acrobat file. And what you do is you press Control D or Command D on a Mac. Okay, and you'll get the document properties. You can also go to File and Document Properties. And in the description, you look for this part where it says page size. A poster size is 85 centimeters by 120 centimeters. You see here in our size we have a bit of extra. These are our bleeds, but your file should be 85 by 120 centimeters plus some extras for the bleeds. If it's anything smaller or bigger, the print shop will reject it and you will have to send them a new file. So please pay attention to that. And I think this is it for another tutorial. If you want some more tips, feel free to add your questions in the comments and I can make more videos. Good luck.